Ambassador, last year your country carried out more than 20 ballistic missile tests and 2 nuclear tests. Is a 6th nuclear test now imminent? And in spite of all the warnings against it, does your country intend to pursue its missile and nuclear programs?
6차 핵시험에 대해서 말한다면 그건 여기 나와 우리가 지금 영국의 조국에 있지도 않고 영국에 있기 때문에 그 시점에 대해서는 모릅니다. 다만 우리 핵시험은 이 경애하는 최고 영도자 김정은 동지께서 결심하시는 임의 시각에 임의 장소에서
Even if that risks military action, a military response from the United States?
그걸 무서워한다면은 우리가 지금까지 그런 핵시험이나 이 탄도리 미사일 발사를 하지 않았을 것입니다. 우리 미국이 그런 공격에 대처해서 핵 무력을 발전시키고 있습니다. 미국이 우리를 공격을 한다면은 그 어떤 형태의 공격에도 다 대응해 줄 수 있는 그런 준비를 우리 군대와 인민은 만단히 갖추고 있습니다. 미국이 군사적 공격 같은 거는 생각하지도 않습니다.
What would be the consequences of a United States preemptive strike on your country? What would your country's response be to that?
미국이 선제 공격을 할 수가 없습니다. 미국이 움쩍하게만 하면 우리가 그저 다 이 미국 그 전략 자산들을 다 제가루로 만들어 치울 준비가 다 되어 있습니다.
For the first time in decades, North Korea sent a letter to the U.S. It was penned by a re-established Foreign Affairs Committee of the country's parliament. The letter was directed to the U.S. House of Representatives in response to recently approved sanctions against North Korea's shipping industry. It warned that North Korea will keep a watchful eye on the U.S. and would respond to further aggressions with, quote, efforts to strengthen nuclear deterrence beyond anyone's imagination. The US and North Korea don't have an official diplomatic channel, so there's no word on whether the letter actually made it to the House. Regardless, the Senate still has to vote on whether or not to implement the sanctions.
Now to some potentially big news out of North Korea. The regime says it's ready for talks with the United States at the right time. Director General of the North America Bureau of North Korea's Foreign Ministry, Choi Sun-hee, told reporters in Beijing on Saturday that Pyongyang will hold talks with Washington under the right conditions. Che was returning from Norway following talks this week with a group of American experts, including a former US envoy to the UN and Robert Einhorn, the US State Department's former special advisor for non-proliferation and arms control. When asked whether North Korea is preparing to hold talks with the Moon Jae-in administration in South Korea, Che said the situation is being observed. Che's comments on talks with the US raises the possibility for bilateral contact after months of heightened tensions. President Trump recently told Reuters that he would be, quote, honored to hold talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un himself if the conditions for dialogue were right.
A Russian fighter jet has flown close to a U.S. Navy plane operating over the Black Sea. A U.S. Navy spokesperson said on Friday the Russian Su-27 came within about 6 meters of a U.S. Navy plane. According to a U.S. Navy official, the interaction took place on Tuesday, lasted 65 minutes, and was considered safe and professional. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that a Russian fighter jet was sent to intercept a U.S. aircraft approaching the Russian border over the Black Sea Tuesday. The U.S. aircraft later changed its flying course away from the border. Last month, Russian Bear bombers and fighter jets flew off Alaska's shore 4 times in 4 days. In response, U.S. dispatched F-22 stealth fighter jets to intercept the Russian formation.
Following Russia's foreign minister's visit to the United States this week, Russia's presidential aide Yuri Ushakov said that Moscow and Washington have many opportunities for joint work despite some of the issues remaining from the past. That was a reference to the legacy of the previous White House administration under President Barack Obama. Ushakov indicated that Moscow is still waiting for some of the obstacles on the path to restoring good ties to be removed. For instance, Moscow expects the U.S. to return diplomatic property seized by the Obama administration. Last December, the U.S. expelled 35 Russian diplomats who the Obama administration accused of being spies and barred access to 2 diplomatic compounds Russia used as recreation facilities. Ushakov said that while Russia didn't respond at the time, retaliation could not be ruled out in the future. The US sanctioned Russia for what it said was interference in last year's US presidential elections, allegations Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has once again dismissed as fabricated. The Kremlin on Friday expressed hope that what it called emotional obsession with the so-called Russian factor in Washington will soon pass, and reiterated that Moscow is ready to advance on the path of restoring ties as far as the US is ready to go.
One day after being suspended when a French landing craft ran aground, multinational amphibious exercises on the U.S. Pacific island of Guam were moving ahead as scheduled Saturday. First Lieutenant Joshua Hayes, a spokesman for the U.S. 3rd Marine Division, said Japanese soldiers will practice rubber craft raids. On Sunday, U.S. Marines plan to conduct live-fire training with French troops. The weekend-long maneuvers also involved the United Kingdom. They were intended to show support for the free passage of vessels in international waters amid concerns China may restrict access to the South China Sea.
Terrorists attacked Hong Kong, causing panic and injuring dozens at a public activity before taking people hostage. But don't worry, it's no real. It's a counter-terrorism drill held by Hong Kong police, which aims to test and enhance their counter-terrorism capability. The scenario is that terrorists attack people with knives, pistols, and homemade hand grenades. And there are several simulated terrorist attacks at different places at the same time, referencing to recent methods adopted by terrorist groups. The goal of the exercise is to assess effectiveness of contingency plans and to ensure that the officers are ready for any scenario, even though Hong Kong's terrorism threat level remains at moderate. The 4-day drill, codenamed Hot Shield, involves the Police Emergency Unit, Counter-Terrorism Response Unit, Special Duties Unit, and Police Negotiation Cadre, as well as other agencies. In the first 3 days of the exercise, police arrested 2 terrorists after intelligence-led operations and discovered a bomb-making location. The large-scale drill helps to prepare the police force for upcoming events, including visits by state leaders in late June. Police sources say more than a third of the entire Hong Kong police force will be deployed next month during celebrations to mark the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China.
Swiss authorities have admitted they cannot ban an Islamic Salafist group known as True Religion, despite grave security concerns over, quote, forbidden activities. The organization has distributed millions of Qurans all across Europe, including Switzerland. However, it's already been banned in Germany following police raids and a criminal investigation against its members, this after they were found to be recruiting people to join the fight in Iraq and Syria. Zurich police told us why they can't ban the group.
We cannot ban the organization because they're not organized, they have no address or something like that. We have given a recommendation, the cities will have to act.
The police explained that a ban would clash with religious freedom rights. However, they add local authorities can bar them and recommend doing so. Officers described the group's Quran distributing campaign as a front for incitement to jihadist activities. And we discussed this with Claudio Zanetti, a member of parliament for the Swiss People's Party, and Johan Mahmoud, a former British Home Office counter-terrorism advisor.
If we issue a blanket rule, we could end up contravening a very, very important value expression that has taken us so many years to come to. Why would we want to allow even the extremists, to be fair, to behave in such a way that we end up losing exactly what we stand for? That means that they win and we lose.
The police and our officials, they have to act according to the law. They cannot just recommend something because they like someone or they dislike him. We have laws in this country. And if they are against the laws, those people, then go and catch them.
The problem with harassment and that form of intervention is that these groups can become even more radicalized and cause more trouble. It's best to keep them in the open and to operate at that level rather than let them go underground and cause more harm and, you know, be involved in more sinister and malicious.
If you're not allowed to address problems, then how could you fix them? I think political correctness is actually a sickness and should be stopped. Let us speak freely as we were used to it.
If you want to get a visa in Chile, you have to be patient, very patient. Immigrants get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be the first in line when the offices open. There are forms to fill in and paperwork to send. And thousands of people are arriving every week. Lady Murillo is from the Dominican Republic.
The economic situation is very bad in my country, Haiti, Venezuela, and many other countries. That's why people come to Chile in search of a better future, to be able to progress and get more money.
Chile has a relatively small percentage of immigrants, only 3.5%, compared to around 11% in most other developed countries. But because it's easier for Latinos to come to Chile than to travel to Europe, the numbers have tripled in the last 5 years. Haiti is one country that's having a big impact on Chile. It has the fastest growing number of immigrants, and that's a problem for some Chileans. They're not used to having people from so many different cultures living here, and many Haitians in particular say they experience racism.
Sometimes the Chileans treat us badly. They will come and buy from us and make rude comments about our skin color. When they think we are not looking, they say that we smell.
Life is difficult in Chile. Food and rent are expensive, and if you don't speak the language, it can be hard to get work. But despite this, thousands of immigrants say they're determined to do whatever it takes to build a better future here.
A 20-year-old Palestinian man has been shot dead by Israeli soldiers during clashes at a rally in Nabi Saleh, a village in the West Bank. According to the Israeli military, their soldiers opened fire after dozens of Palestinians hurled rocks at them. The rally was one of many across the West Bank in support of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails who have been on hunger strike for 26 days. They're demanding better prison conditions. Israel claimed that the strike organizer is Marwan Barghouti, who is in prison but is widely seen as a potential successor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
A look at some of the many churches inside the old city here at night in Jerusalem. And when President Trump arrives next week, he's going to hear a lot about the threats facing Israel. A better armed, now battle-hardened Hezbollah in Lebanon, and ISIS with a foothold on the once quiet Syrian border. Earlier this week, we took a trip up north to find out for ourselves. We just heard part of this war, of the machine gun fire. That happens every day, every night?
Every night.
A few hundred yards from Syria, Israeli Major Yosef Murad explains it's not the machine gun fire keeping him up. An ISIS car ramming the border with explosives is his biggest fear, he says, adding gunmen would follow the bombing to attack Israeli villages. The Israeli military captured video of just such an ISIS attack on the Syrian side of the border. This footage, never before seen in the United States, shows Israeli commandos heading through the minefields towards Syria, searching for intelligence. Here, in one of the Syrian villages, the commander says he watched as ISIS took a man, called him an infidel, and hung him. And it is not just patrols along the border protecting Israelis in the north. At this forward operating base in the Golan Heights, Israel's Merkava tanks are quite literally armed and ready for battle. We also traveled along the Lebanon border with Captain Roy Neubauer. You said that every night you go to bed being ready for war tomorrow morning?
I don't go to sleep. You can ask him. I don't sleep too much. I don't sleep.
And when we got out of his armored Jeep, we understood why. 200-300 yards away, that's Hezbollah. We're here. What are they doing?
They're looking at us just like we're looking at them. The whole of the southern part of Lebanon is used to prepare the terrain to war.
So rockets, artillery,
everything.
And elsewhere, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that the peaceful coexistence of Palestine and Israel is an indispensable condition for security and stability in the Middle East. Putin made the comments after talks with his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas in the Russian city of Sochi. Now, Putin said that Moscow will continue to support the resumption of direct dialogue between Palestine and Israel. And Abbas accepted Putin's proposal for direct dialogue in Moscow and said Palestine is willing to work with Russia and the U.S. to bring about an end to conflicts with Israel.
Pope Francis has visited one of the most famous Catholic pilgrimage sites, the Shrine of Fatima in Portugal, to name 2 shepherd children saints. Many Catholics believe the children received 3 secrets from the Virgin Mary in 1917. Those who believe that walking the road to Fatima is easy are wrong. It's not, it's painful, but with a group, with good people helping each other, it's a great feeling. At an enormous open-air mass, the Pope called for his followers to tear down walls and cross every frontier in search of justice. Thousands of pilgrims from all over the world welcomed Pope Francis in Fatima with joy and a lot of emotion. At the moment they prayed together, there was utter silence. But the most anticipated moment of the 100th anniversary of the Fatima apparitions will be when 2 of the 3 children are canonized. Those 2 children were Francisco and Jacinta Marto, who died shortly after the apparitions, aged 9 and 10. The 3rd visionary, Lucia dos Santos, became a nun and died aged 97 in 2005.
Every time he takes center stage, the crowd goes crazy. President Hassan Rouhani symbolizes everything these young Iranians wish for in a president. He brought us more security, more economic stability and more personal freedom. I've been able to walk the streets more easily in the past few years.
For me, the most important thing during his presidency has been the stability of prices and the exchange rate to the dollar.
The nuclear deal was a great success and a turning point in his presidency, and I think for that alone he deserves 4 extra years. If he beats the Principlist, his rival party, they're confident he will fulfill the promises he has not kept so far.
Among the young and urban educated Iranians here in northern Tehran, President Rouhani enjoys great support. His Principlist rivals, however, have put their focus on Iran's lower classes, which they try to win over with monetary promises.
Without water, desert towns and cities would simply not exist. Large parts of Iraqi territory, now retaken from Daesh, had abundant supplies before the terror group moved in. Now it comes from a local and polluted river. The water from here hydrates the local population in surrounding villages and makes its way to aid camps. But not everyone is happy about their supply.
Some people drink it. No one has died, but people were poisoned or fainted. All of this because of the water here.
The people of Sayramun have other problems. There's no gas to boil the water, and there's a nearby shifting front line to contend with. Daesh didn't think twice about damaging the water supply.
IS jihadists were in the water treatment plant and they bombed it. It's destroyed. All the pumps, the filter system and sedimentation basins have been destroyed. Now the water goes directly from the river to reservoirs and onto the city.
The United Nations is trying to ease the suffering of displacement, but repairing destroyed facilities will take much longer than it did for Daesh to destroy them. The UN and aid agencies working in Iraq hope to supply water to all retaken areas within 3 months. But it's a slow process as temperatures rise above 40 degrees. Regional officials estimate 35 billion is needed to repair all the damaged infrastructure in Nineveh province. Frustrations could boil over with the government in Baghdad, which is yet to release any funds for the work.
The World Health Organization says there's a new outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That's after a person who tested positive for the virus died. The World Health Organization says it's trying to track down all those who may have come into contact with the victim. The previous outbreak of Ebola in the DRC was in 2014 and killed 42 people. Between the same year and 2015, a separate outbreak killed more than 11,000 people in West Africa.
It's a treatment almost as painful as the condition. Fatima Rashid, a Syrian refugee from Hama province, who now lives in a camp in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, receives weekly injections at this nearby hospital. She suffers from cutaneous leishmaniasis, also known as the Aleppo boil. The disease causes disfiguring skin lesions, often on the face and hands. Yusuf Hamoud and his 7-year-old niece Jahan also received treatment here. They escaped the fighting in Aleppo 5 years ago to a nearby camp and have been struggling with the condition ever since.
We are already suffering as refugees. We lack the basic necessities. We live in tents and are surrounded by garbage. It's an unhealthy environment. Now we have this skin disease that we are suffering, as if we need more pain and stress in our lives.
The Aleppo boil is a parasitic disease that was first reported in the northern Syrian city in 1745. For years, doctors have been able to contain the condition, which is spread by sandflies. But since the start of the Syrian conflict in 2011, it has re-emerged as a public health threat that doctors warn could reach endemic levels.
The Syrian conflict has created what doctors describe as the perfect conditions for an outbreak like this. As the fighting intensified, hospitals were bombed and attempts to contain the disease were abandoned, leaving health workers little choice but to focus on those war casualties rather than those suffering from this disease.
It seems even the dead can escape the horrors of war. These ancient mummies in a museum in the capital Sana'a have long been protected from heat and humidity. But Yemen's 2-year-old civil war has led to frequent power cuts that shut down the dehumidifiers, and sanctions have cut supplies of chemicals needed to preserve the corpses. And now they're rotting away. A sign that not only the country's present and future is being harmed, but also its rich past.
These mummies are more than 3,000 years old and are now decaying. They are contaminated by bacteria and fungi. We are also worried for our safety because of the bacteria emanating from the mummies. It may be a kind of bacteria that is not known to science.
The remains here are of people from a lost pagan civilization which existed long before the birth of Islam. The mummies are among a host of ancient artifacts that are threatened by conflict across the region. A Saudi-backed military coalition has carried out thousands of airstrikes against Houthi rebels who overthrew Yemen's government. The conflict has killed at least 10,000 people and unleashed a humanitarian crisis. The coalition has enforced a blockade on the country, which imports 90% of its food. And there's no chance of importing other goods, like the chemicals that would save these mummies.
Donald Trump has spent a week engulfed in fresh crisis over the firing of FBI Director James Comey. But he can at least savor a breakthrough in his most important but contentious trade relationship. A deal that opens up China to US beef while giving Uncle Sam some Chinese chicken.
But that's not the only dish on this trade menu. As both countries open up access to each other's markets, US credit card companies will have an opportunity to take a slice of the charges generated by $6 trillion worth of electronic payments conducted in China every year.
These agreements across a whole range of sectors are the fruit of discussions between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Trump last month, when they set a 100-day deadline to improve trade relations. Both sides see the movement as a sign that a relationship characterized by frequent battles may be changing.
The progress made by us in such a short amount of time shows that if both sides respect each other and cooperate with a win-win spirit, we can deal with disputes properly and benefit our two peoples.
We made an announcement of a 100-day economic plan with the Chinese, so I think we're very happy with how we're proceeding on trade.
Some analysts question how quickly US companies will feel the benefits in China, where foreign firms have long reported difficulty penetrating the domestic market.
Even so, it demonstrates how quickly Trump can turn from antagonist to friend. He entered the White House accusing China of stealing US jobs, and yet now his relationship with Beijing is blossoming, while neighboring countries such as Canada and Mexico are starting to feel the heat of an America First trade agenda.